Hello again. I realized that I posted something on Facebook some time ago and never followed up with a video, so here's the video. I've been using this for a while. I talked about it before I started using it, and now I have been using it, so I want to share with you. This is the issue of what happens when you lose the internet. Especially when you're about to give a major talk. And I don't remember if you remember, but some time ago there was a major issue with Zoom, and Zoom was down for a morning. And the funny thing, or not so funny at the time, was that the day after that I was about to give a keynote to an audience of about 2,200 people. And you can imagine what goes through my head. What happens if this doesn't work? Well, one of the things you can always do, and I did for that case, is to pre-record your session. And I pre-record it, I send them a link, I actually send them the entire video so that the organizers of the event, so that in the rare possibility that I'm not going to be able to make it, just use the recording instead, and I'll join as soon as I can to at least moderate Q&A and the chat box. Well, as it turns out, the next day everything worked fine, presented 2,200 people, and we were good. But when you go through something like this, you start to wonder. You're paying for internet, you're supposed to get very high rate, and all of a sudden, internet is down. You don't have internet. Well, so first of all, I want to show you something. There's a website called downdetector.com. If you go to downdetector.com, you will see all of the service providers, and you can click on each one of them, including Zoom, even though Zoom is not a service provider, and you can click on each one of them and see what is their status, and you can see it on a map. So I'm going to show you an example. That was the day that I recorded that video, that I took those screenshots. Look at Spectrum. This is Spectrum. Look at the downs that they had, including, actually, there was no down in the Dallas area, although you can see on the map kind of that there was, but the top ones were more in the northwest, midwest. But this is where people are not getting internet. They're not getting internet. Well, at that same time, I went and I checked Frontier. Look at Frontier, the other major service provider. AT&T does not provide to my home, so I didn't even check what they had. But look at the outages that they have. So you are not immune to internet being down. And so I wanted to have some kind of a recovery, some kind of a backup. Oh yeah, I guess I did check AT&T. Look at AT&T. So you can see that there are areas probably between those maps that have overlap. So you wouldn't have internet from one or the other. But for the most part, I would say if you didn't have internet from one, the others probably are still providing, as long as they're not using the same infrastructure. And that's an important point, that when we talk about different service providers, some of them use the same infrastructure. So for example, different cable internet providers are offering cable to your neighborhood, to your home, and you're going, well, I'm going to hedge my bets and work with two different ones. As it turns out, they're using the same infrastructure, and when one of them has an outage, an internet outage, so will the other one that's just providing it over the infrastructure of the first one. And I believe that was part of the 1996 Telecommunications Act that gave service providers access to other service providers' internet access or infrastructure. So you can buy service from one, but actually it's being delivered through another one. So you got to be careful with that. This is, by the way, Zoom, and you can see now I know that was the day where Zoom had the issue. That's when I took those screenshots, and you can see that Zoom was out as well. So another thing, and if you went through the certification, the eSpeakers virtual speaker certification, virtual presenter certification, one of the things they're going to ask you to do is go to this website called fast.com. And fast.com actually is powered. It says it's powered by Netflix. You're not going to see it because it's right behind my back. That little note, well, you can see it now. You can see it. It's provided by Netflix. And they're going to ask you to click on fast.com, which would show you what is the speed that you're getting. So right now I was getting at that time, I took that screenshot, I was getting 85 megabits per second. Then they're going to ask you to click on this show more info button. And when you click on that, you'll see 85 megabits per second down. Down means coming to me. So this is video coming into my computer. And 9.3 megabits per second going up. I'm not going to go too deep into, or I'm not going to go at all into how the infrastructure works, but typically it's harder to get data up than to get it back down to me. So I'm sending 9.3 megabits per second. Now, as a speaker, which one do you care about the most? Not the one coming down. It's the one going up, because that's the video that's coming from your camera, your computer, into the internet, Zoom, or anything else. Another thing that they looked at is what is the latency, and you can see that I have 17 milliseconds, 234 millisecond loaded, just so that you get a sense. This is a quarter of a second, so there's a delay of a quarter of a second. Believe it or not that big a deal. But, you know, if it is higher than that, it can create some kind of an awkward situation where you're speaking and you're waiting to hear something on the other side, and it can have some impact on having echo because of that delay. Anyway, so what did I do? I actually talked to a friend who, it was odd, we talked about that, and then he just sent me a box with exactly the device that I was about to buy, and this is the device. It's a TP-Link. This specific one is TL-R600 VPN. It also includes a VPN. I think they have an R470, 480, 460, several different models. This one is like $60, so it's not the end of the world. What it is, other than VPN, which I didn't care about because I have VPN software installed on my computers, but this is something that's called a load balancing router. It's a load balancing router, and I'm going to show you in the next slide what I used it for, or how did I use it. So here's what my infrastructure looks like right now. These are the devices that I have. So on the bottom left, I have Frontier. Frontier is the new service provider that I subscribe to. I used to have them in the past, especially when they were Verizon Fios. So this is fiber. So they're using fiber infrastructure to get into my house. And I had Spectrum. Spectrum used to be Time Warner Cable, I believe, and they're a cable provider. So I have two separate infrastructures being used to provide internet, so I'm not worried about the infrastructure going down and both my service providers dying because they're using the same infrastructure. Those are completely different infrastructures. Frontier using fiber, and Spectrum using cable. Each one of them provided their own modem. So those are two different modems that are in my house. And then both modems I plugged into this load balancing router, the R600 that I have, on the two left sockets, two left jacks. So now I have two internets going in there, and I took one internet out. So the blue cables go from the modems into the load balancing router, and the red one comes out of it as the local area network. This is the red cable that I have here, and the red cable I plug directly into, happens to be another TP-Link product. This is the Wi-Fi and Ethernet router. Most Wi-Fi routers are also Ethernet routers. So if you look at the back, you're going to see where the wide area network or the internet plugs in. Sometimes it's just called internet. And then for typically local area network connections. So this is how you connect to computers. But this is a Wi-Fi router. So in this case, what you see here is that the computer in the bottom, right there behind my head, there, this laptop is wireless. So most laptops, my phones, they're all Wi-Fi and connected to the router. But I also have a CAT6 cable, and I'll talk about the CAT6 cable because, believe it or not, I made a mistake that I learned from it, and I felt so stupid because I'm one of the people who created those standards, the IEEE 802, 802.11, which is Wi-Fi, and I forgot to pay attention to the cable that I was buying, at least the initial cable that I was buying. So whenever I want to use wired Ethernet, and for the laptop, actually even the laptop that I'm recording from right now, I actually have a wired connection. That's the green cable. Everything else in the house, with the exception of one more computer, when my wife teaches, she uses a computer that we have a CAT6 cable going straight into that one. But everything else is connected through Wi-Fi. And believe it or not, Wi-Fi is pretty stable, pretty good. The fact that I'm using Ethernet or hardwired cable is not that big a deal, but it makes me feel more comfortable. I'm not susceptible to any interference. Being involved in the creation of Wi-Fi, I can tell you that microwave ovens actually transmit on one of the frequencies that's being used by Wi-Fi. Anyway, so again, this is the infrastructure that I have now in my house. 2 different internet service providers that are providing services with their own cable or fiber modems going into my load balancing router. From the load balancing router, I'm going into the Wi-Fi router. From there, either through cable to another computer or through Wi-Fi to another computer. Now, I said CAT6, so I'm not talking about cats. I'm actually not a very much cat person, but that's besides the point. But there is a category of cables, of Ethernet cables. And so my mistake, if you remember initially that I showed you that I had 85 megabits per second, and at some point I thought about it for a second that, wait, the service that I acquired from Spectrum, which is what I had until now that I have both, was supposed to be 200 megabits per second. Why am I only getting 85? The thing that was limiting me was actually the Ethernet cable, because I used a CAT5. And I didn't even realize that I was using a CAT5. I just picked a cable and bought it and paid for it and installed it without actually reading that it said CAT5. Never thought about it. CAT5 is limited to 100 megabits per second. You can see it down here. It's 100 megabits per second. CAT5e, 6, 6a. Right now I'm using a 6a, CAT6a. They're capable of much higher frequencies, much higher data rates. And so I use that. You already saw what the infrastructure looks like. 2 modems providing into the load balancing router. From there to my Wi-Fi. Through my CAT6, I ran fast.com, and this is what I have today. I have 600 megabits per second coming into my computer. Great! Nobody cares. It means that I can download things faster, videos download faster. I can download files, but going up, that's not the number we care about. We care about the 120 megabits per second. 120 megabits per second is very, very solid. In the next slide, I'm going to show you, we're going to see if that even matters. But another thing that I liked is the much lower latency that I have, which is probably provided by, you can see that right now, it's the Frontier provider. And if for any reason I disconnected it, it will, because it's a load balancing router and it does everything automatically, it would revert to the other one. I don't know at any point in time which one we're using. So when I place a Zoom call, I don't know which one we're using. All I know is that we have both of them. Now, since I talked about Zoom, and before I go to the next slide, I want you to know one important thing. If you think that having those 2 internet connections will make the Zoom operation smooth even if one of them dropped in the middle of the call, not exactly true. It's not exactly true. The reason is because whether Zoom or your computer is using Zoom through one connection, internet connection, or another internet connection or provider, that's using different IP address, internet address. So think about it, it's like I'm using a different telephone number to connect to the person on the other side. When one of them dies, Zoom will freeze, and I tested it several times for about 20 seconds. It takes Zoom about 20 seconds, and I did not find a way to go to Zoom and say, I want you to try it faster. If something freezes, I want you to try again, reconnect again. But Zoom will automatically reconnect and get out of this freeze mode. It's way better than you lost internet and you're done. Now you have about 20-minute freeze if you lost the internet connection that was used by the load balancing router at that time. Okay, so what I did was I just went into my infrastructure, into my connection, and I disconnected one of the providers. I disconnected the one that was indicating was in use right now. Zoom froze, and I thought, oh man, that's not what I was hoping will happen. It took about 20 seconds. Zoom tried again, tried to reconnect through another IP address and said, oh, I can still connect, and I'm back on the call. Again, it's not as smooth as I would have hoped. I would have hoped that this would be completely seamless. However, it's a lot better than you lost it altogether. Now, here I am bragging about 600 megabit per second down, 120 megabit per second up, but do I really need that? And I promised you a slide. So this slide, this would be a good time to pause and see what's there, but I'm going to leave it here for a while. And that is, I went to the Zoom's website to see how much internet speed do I really need. And so I highlighted a few important ones. Talk less about the one-to-one video calling. It has lower requirement. For group video calling, we're talking about 800 kilobits per second to 1 megabits per second, both up and down. Not 600, not 120, not even 5. When you're sending 1080p high definition videos, you require 3 megabits per second, and it should actually say going up. So you need 3 megabits per second going up. At any point in time, I had more than that, and you typically have more than that. So why is that? And there's a link in the bottom, and that's a link from Zoom's website as to what you need. By the way, it's kind of weird that they're saying to send 1080p when they don't record it at 1080p, even not even on your computer, on your local computer, it's not being recorded at 1080p speed. Well, let's go on. This is why it's important to know those speeds, because you already have yet another alternative, and the other alternative is your phone, your iPhone or anything else. So I'm using an iPhone, and if you look at the iPhone, you have something that's called the personal hotspot. So if you click here, right now my personal hotspot is off. If you click here, you can take the cellular data that comes into your phone and use your phone as a Wi-Fi, another source of Wi-Fi. You will need to go into your computer, so I'm showing you what it looks like on Windows 10. And see here, other than my Wi-Fi, so this is my Ethernet connection in the top, MLDN 8, that's the name of my network. There, now you know my network. Come near my house, try and steal my internet. It's protected. There's a lock on it, which is something important that you do as well. The next one is Wi-Fi. We have Wi-Fi connected to the same router that I have at home. This one is my iPhone, and you'll see that my iPhone is available. Oh, by the way, I created another network, Solomon Guest. So if you're a guest in my house, I don't need to give you my main Wi-Fi access passcode and make you part of my network. I'm actually letting you be outside but get internet access. But that's besides the point again. This is where you would define my phone. Where would you put your phone? So what I did was I just went with fast.com. I took my phone to different places in my house. And I found that in one place I could get 4.2 megabits per second, 6.9 up. In another place, 3.7 megabits per second, 9.3 up. They're all kind of in the same ballpark, but it's important if you're about to do that. You can see that mine is using 5G. Network. It's an iPhone 11. Yours might be a 4G phone. I don't know. It depends on what phone you have and what service you have and what service is available in your area. But for either one of those are probably enough. But I would still strongly recommend that if you're going to be using your phone as a backup, then use it this way. Go around the house, see where you get the best speeds. Here I have 3 bars. I can assume that this is going to be the best one. It also does provide me 4.2 megabits per second, which is more than anything else, even though for some reason it shows on the upload 6.9 versus 7 or 9.3. Doesn't matter that much. Just make sure that if you're going to use your phone as a backup, put it in backup mode. Put it in personal hotspot mode, but put it in the best place in the house. And I would say if you're going to use that as a backup, then as you start giving your talk, just set up the phone, put it in that mode, and if something happens, that's where you're going to switch. One last thing I'm going to show you is that there is actually another tool. This tool looks like it's $3 per month. It's called Speedify, and what Speedify does is just the same. It does the same thing as the load balancing router does, but it does it virtually within your computer, assuming that you can deliver more than one internet connection into your computer. So let's say that in my computer I have Ethernet coming in. you're not going to be able, typically, unless you have two Wi-Fi radios, which you don't, you're not going to be able to have two Wi-Fi connections going into your computer. So again, unless, and you can buy for very cheap another Wi-Fi endpoint that plugs into USB. But if not, then Ethernet coming into one port, Wi-Fi coming into another port. Speedify as a software does load balancing within your computer. They say that it's seamless, but it's subject to exactly the same thing, and that is Zoom uses one IP address if it's using one connection, another IP address using another one. So you're probably going to be susceptible to the same 20-second delay until Zoom says, wait, I'm not getting anything through this connection. I'm going to try another connection. This is what I use now. Makes me feel more comfortable and safe that I'm not going to be, that if any of my service providers dies, I'm still going to have an internet connection and I can stay in the call. And, you know, we're speakers, and whether we're making money on that call or not, if it's one that we're giving for free, you don't want technology to be the one blocking you, especially not the day of the event, in the middle of the event. I hope this is helpful. Let me know if there's anything else, and I'll find time and record more videos. Stay safe, be good, be trusted.